Okay.
Right. The live thing has come back on, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it should now
Meeting is now.
we should now be live on YouTube. The thing I need to make sure that I do is to turn off my audio so that I can now see us there. So
right.
Video is now going to be playing there. There we go. We're now live on YouTube. I'm going to put that up on our Sitcom Geeks thing.
Right.
Cool. And
shall I put it up as well? Or,
you could put it up. I'll put it also up on our shared Twitter feed there, just to say here's where we are. You can all set in advance, but it's often more trouble than it's worth. I guess it makes you a bit more silky smooth. So I'm just now answering your questions. There we go. So, Dave, why don't we just kick off? It's 6 o'clock. We should probably start talking. Why don't you tell us about? So we've got two completely different approaches to courses, and because you're doing one that writes sitcom in 8 weeks, and I'm doing another one, which is much more about kind of. I've got like a day-long course, but while we wait for some people to show up and ask us some questions, do you want to just tell us about what your approach is and what is the overall philosophy behind the course to writing a sitcom in 8 weeks? Because 8 weeks isn't long if it's not your full-time job.
Yeah, it's not long at all, actually, and I do say to people,
sorry, we should probably better record this as well. Be on the safe side.
Yeah. Yep, no, that's fine. So it's not a long time at all, really, especially if you're working. I give people a week, ideally to do like a couple of hours of, if they can, during the week of homework. But it roughly divides into four. The first 2 weeks is about the idea and really kind of exploring the idea and really pushing it, because I think you can just, as we often say on the podcast, you can start your script too quickly, and I think there's a few things that you can do before you start writing. The first 2 weeks, as I say, what's the idea? How is it working? How is it different from other ideas? How are you bringing something new to it that hasn't been seen before? And then in weeks 3 and 4, we go into a bit more detail in the characters and the story. So we are looking at that, we're still not writing a word yet, but we're looking at the characters. We're looking how the characters are going to create stories. So then in weeks 5 and 6, we're going to narrow down to like one particular episode that we're going to try and write. So we're going to sift through many stories and come up with the one that's best suited to an episode. And then in weeks 7 and 8, hopefully we get to write the script.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's like the script feels like a bit of an afterthought, doesn't it? If you're not careful. And actually, that is the case, isn't it? The script is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. And in fact, what's interesting, I've done it now 4 or 5 times, and I've had people who've come back, they really love doing it, and they've done it 2 or 3 times now, and they're starting to say, hang on, what about you've written the script, okay, now what? And actually that's something that I'm planning to do later in the year, is a course where you take the written script and you rewrite it, and that's going to be a 4-week rewrite in 4 weeks. So I'm slowly coming down. I'm slowly bringing it down, but I'm not quite matching you because you've got your write a sitcom in a day course, haven't you, James?
Yes.
So
which I'm aware.
That's, so
it's obviously nonsense. You can't write a sitcom in a day, and it says so in the publicity material. So I'm fairly comfortable that I've headed off expectations in that direction. But I think the thing that I'm just want people to do is just to spend a day thinking about the business of writing a sitcom, and in a way, I guess we'd be covering similar ground. But I think one of the main reasons that people end up with a script that they don't like. And because one of the things that when we talk to people, Dave, don't we? People say, oh yeah, I sent a script into this competition, but it wasn't any good. To which the answer is, well, why wasn't it any good? Why did you send it if you didn't think it was any good? So I think and I think the reason is people kind of bail on their idea. They run out of time because they hadn't realized how long all of the preparation takes. And so in a way, what I'm trying to do with my course, which is a week on Monday and a week on Friday from today. So that's the last day in August and the first Friday in September 2021. It's just like mapping out what actually needs to be done. So it's just like, here's loads of information about how you actually do it, but here are the things that you need to be thinking about in order to write a sitcom. And this is how long it's going to take as well. And I think it's just being realistic about all of these steps, really. Because again, as you say, people just leap into typing scripts really quickly. And it's not wise to do that, because it's almost like starting to knit without deciding what kind of jumper you're going to be, or how big it's going to be, or whether, it's like whether it's patterned or not. It's like, well, you're going to have to do an awful lot of unpicking if you don't make up your mind pretty soon. So, and I think the other big thing, which I mention a lot, is just how, I mean, you've talked about it well, spending the first 2 weeks on getting the idea right. And I think for me, the big thing is getting your idea right. So what is your idea? How can it be, it needs to be your story. It needs to be your voice. It doesn't, and one of the besetting sins that we sometimes read in scripts that we get is clearly the person who's written the script loves situation comedy. But what they've done is they've written what I call a fan fiction sitcom script. It's a love letter to sitcom, but it's a sitcom that just feels like just derivative of other sitcoms, because they want to be a sitcom writer because they love sitcoms, rather than what are the characters that I'm interested in? What do I want to write about? So I think to kind of avoid that.
Yeah, to be fair, I would say as well, when I started out, the first sitcom that I ever wrote was very much a poor man's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because I just didn't know what to do, but I knew that I loved Hitchhiker's Guide. And so I, through writing all 6 episodes of this radio sitcom, which of course is just a complete waste of time and energy, but it did, it did actually... it was the first step towards finding my voice, was actually borrowing Douglas Adams's voice. So yeah. I wouldn't totally dismiss that, but as James, as you've just said there, you're probably writing a love letter to the form onto your favorite sitcom.
Yeah,
I think another thing that I would add, and this is kind of less about being a sitcom writer, and this is partly why I spend so much time at the beginning talking about the idea, is that actually finishing the script, actually finishing a thing, is, as far as I'm concerned, almost as important, as how good the idea is, how brilliant the script is going to be. And the first draft is never going to be that great, but to actually, I mean, I've done it, and I'm sure you've done it, James. I've got a lot of unfinished ideas, unfinished scripts lying around that I just, I didn't finish them, and that was a mistake, and I should have finished them, because you kind of need to affect closure on an idea. I think even if you finish it and don't look at it for another 3 or 4 weeks or 2 months or whatever, it's just a good thing to do, to finish it.
I think that's right. I mean, get to the end. I mean, the alternative, I think, was New Year, I gave lots of advice about writing, about how to be a better writer, and one of my ideas or suggestions was, bin it, don't finish it. You've been nurturing this idea for ages. It's just not working. Forget it. Start again. But if you've got lots of unfinished ideas, for goodness sake, finish something. and then improve it, because writing is rewriting. You're going to, if you want to be a sitcom writer, you're going to spend an awful lot of your time rewriting scripts, probably more time rewriting than writing. So yeah. So we actually have people tuned in on YouTube, and we've actually got some questions here that have appeared straight away. And here's the first, which is, how useful is it to have a writing partner? My quick one is really useful when it comes to coming up with ideas and not getting furious on your own about notes that you don't agree with, but not so good when you basically have to split the money, because you do have to, the script fee is the same. So you don't get that each, you just have to divide it. But two of you can work harder than one of you. You can probably have more going on. You can probably actually work on an existing show and be developing another show at the same time, which might be tricky if it was just one of you. But I think there are lots of upsides. But having said that, there are lots of things. So I've written, I'd spent the first 10, 15 years of my career without a writing partner. And then I started writing with Richard Hurst, who I wrote Bluestone 4-2 with, and have written other scripts with. So, yeah, I really enjoyed that. But then there are other things which I've just now gone off and written on my own. I've just written a kind of a mystery comedy drama show on my own, because that just feels really personal to me. But the upside of writing with someone else is that a show that's really personal to both of us is going to be quite strong, because it's just going to feel like it's not more universal. But when we're going through scripts and there's a joke that one of us doesn't like, we tend to take it out and replace it with a joke that we both like. And if we both like it, it's probably a better joke than the one that only one of us likes. So there is a strength in that. Two heads are better than one. But unfortunately, two bank accounts are not better than one, when they are each half the size. So downsides, upsides. You've had lots of writing partners, haven't you, over the years, Dave? What's your reflection on this?
Yeah. Well, principally, mainly, I've written with Pete Sinclair when I was starting out. I think when you're starting out, the big advantage even when you're on your own, however experienced you are, you never know if a joke is funny until you try it out. And if you can try out a joke and you make one person laugh, and if that's person happens to be your writing partner, then that's one more person that you have made laugh than when you're sitting on your own writing it thinking this is funny, and that's actually, it's a big deal, because and you see always on comedy shows frequently they're written by more than one person. Dramas tend to be one person, and you think, why is that? Well, it's just because it's a quicker way to finding out what's funny. But yes, the disadvantages, as you say, they do happen, and generally I'd say I've written more on my own than I have in a partnership. But certainly when you're starting out, I think it's really helpful.
It is, and it's easier said than done. If you haven't met anyone who could write with you, then in a way to try and force that, I think, is hard. But if you kind of get out there, especially if you start working on, the BBC Newsjack kind of shows, and you start going to recordings, or you go to the Edinburgh Festival and you see someone do a show that you just think, oh, wow, that's amazing. That's so what I'm into. Or that's so close to what I'm into. And actually together you could work well. So I think that would be our response to that question. Next question is how, from Random Stuff, good name, how slowly or quickly should you reveal every aspect of your characters? In a way, that's written in a way that I often worry about, because I think people like this idea of revealing information slowly because they're writing a drama and you're peeling back layers and trying to surprise your audience with, oh, you thought they were this person, and actually no they're not, they're this person. Now that can work well in a mystery, suspense, drama, horror genre, but it doesn't work so well in comedy, because confusion is the enemy of comedy. So if you're suddenly revealing your character is different from how they've been set up, that just becomes baffling and not funny. So you want to be a bit careful about that. You may have a character. So what if a character suddenly does something very strange? We're going to be puzzled. But if you then reveal, oh, they did that, it made total sense to them because of this and that for reasons that we didn't fully understand, I think that's okay. But overall, you want your characters to establish themselves in broad strokes super quickly by their first line, what they're wearing when they come in, what they're saying when they're doing. When we first see them, what are they doing? If they're drinking tea or doing the crossword, that's probably not great. If they're brewing tea in a special tea brewing thing, or they're doing the crossword with a huge Oxford dictionary next to them, the one that's sort of, it's 2 large volumes and they've got the little magnifying glass. Okay, that's telling us about the character, but they're just sort of killing time doing the crossword. That's not really doing anything. So I think that first hit is trying to tell as much as you can. So those would be my 2 gut reactions to that question. Dave, what have you got on that?
Yeah, I would say that possibly that there's this slightly mixing up here is, that we the audience know the character from the beginning, but the character doesn't actually know themselves, and that's the whole thing with comedy and why we talk about how a character sees themselves and how others see them. So you can reveal, in the opening seconds with bright flashing neon lights, this is what this character is like, but it then becomes about how they put themselves across to the world and how others see them. And we often refer to that opening 3 minutes of Friends, the pilot episode, which you've either seen it or you can watch it on YouTube after this, and you can see in that opening 3 minutes of Friends every single character trait that you then see for the next 10 years. But what keeps you gripped by them is the way those characters relate to each other and how they see themselves and others see them. So that is I think when you're saying about not revealing a character, it's sort of they're not aware themselves. They lack that self-awareness, and that's where the fun lies, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. Just to say, whilst this is running over on Twitter at Sitcom Geek and at Sitcom Geeks, there's a poll being taken about what you find hardest when writing a sitcom script: dialogue, plot, jokes, characters. We will reveal the end of that poll just before we finish at 7. So at the moment, plot is actually the one that people are really struggling with. That one's winning at the moment. So if you think that's wrong, you need to go and find that. Julian Dutton, a delightful, friendly fellow on Twitter, who's a very talented writer and performer. He wrote Pompidou with Matt Lucas, isn't he, in it? He says writing...
And by complete coincidence... Sorry, carry on.
What, sorry?
I started reading Julian's book this afternoon about silent comedy, and it's fantastic.
There we go. So, but he says writing's easy and fun. The hard bit is getting it read by someone, selling it, and getting it made. Well, I think that's probably true. And this is someone who's sold a show and worked in the industry for quite a long time. So I would agree with that. It's the golden script. It's the golden age of scripted TV, but whether it is for situation comedy or not, I don't know. But anyway,
yeah.
Next question.
I suspect even. Sorry, I can just very quickly, sort of off the back of that, I think, because that is true, and even at least I would say Julian will get his script read, I think, by a well-known company in a way that most people who are starting out, they say, oh, we don't accept scripts from anyone. At least Julian has an agent who would say, my client's written this script, will you have a look? And they will at least maybe have a look and get back in 6 months or whatever. But it is a problem, and it is incredibly difficult, and you kind of have to you have to look at other ways, and you know, you have to look at things like making stuff online, or you know, kind of getting to know people. The two groups of people who do still read scripts are BBC Radio and BBC Children's. So those are the two ways in, and that's, you know, if you think you don't want to write for children's TV because it's beneath you or whatever reason, you're wrong, because children's TV is it's really, really good, and it's as challenging and as great to write for as grown-ups TV. And if you're very lucky, as I was, you end up writing on a show like Horrible Histories that is loved from ages 6 to 60. So, you know, it's definitely worth it. And people in BBC Kids TV, you can get to know them, and the same with BBC Radio producers. You know, you just don't swamp them with tons of stuff, but just kind of affect an introduction, and you know, try and find out the shows they make and write to them, say, I really like your show. If it's something like what you'd like to do, you know, you should at least be able to get a meeting, I think.
Yeah, definitely. But it is hard. There's lots of people out there trying to do it. But as Woody Allen says, 80% of success is showing up. So lots of people just give up. So if you just stick at it, perseverance is probably as great a as great a quality that you need as actual talent. I mean, having talent helps, but there are loads of really super talented people, and you must have known them over the years, Dave, who've just they've just stopped because they just couldn't keep going, and there are reasons for that, and it's sad. And I think one of our big problems at the moment is, I mean, Julian didn't mention it there, but getting paid to write a script is pretty hard. If you've got no track record, you're going to have to write a script yourself. But if I may say, if you've written 150 half hours narratives for the BBC in the last 20 years, then you would hope that I could get scripts commissioned, pilot scripts commissioned. But actually, no one's got any money to develop scripts, even though it's the golden age of TV and everyone's making millions of dollars on making television. No one actually wants to pony up the money for a script. So yeah, I think these are very interesting and strange times to be living in. But we should probably have another question, Dave, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
So Callum has asked a question about sitcoms as second acts, which is stuff that I bang on about. Is there a way to have an overarching quest through the series which works as an arc while working as a second act? Okay, Dave knows what my answer to this is going to be, but Dave, you give your answer first.
Calm down. Yeah. All right. Okay.
Well, firstly,
James is not a fan of
what I mean by a second act is that sitcom is permanent second act. A movie has a first act with an inciting incident, then there's the middle bit, and then there's the resolution. Whereas the sitcom is all the middle. So your character goes round and round and round and round without any great resolution. So most of the classic sitcoms, you know, just sort of have real trouble ending because they're not designed to end. And that's why MASH can run for longer than the Korean War. So because it's a repeating format, it's all act two. The moment somebody resolves their inner turmoil or achieves their overall life goal, it's kind of over. So I would say don't have an overarching story arc, but these days people are kind of expecting that, which is annoying. But Dave, what do you say to this? You have very wise words on this.
Yeah, I mean, bear in mind that there's this idea of Act Two and of characters not learning. You know, this really goes directly against the notion of a character arc. It's a direct contradiction, really. Aristotle is still the go-to expert on writing 3-act dramas, and the Greek word catharsis, which is what the character goes through towards the end of Act 2 and the start of Act 3, where they learn, and they learn from their mistakes, and that is the crucial difference between drama and comedy, or in fact drama and comedy / tragedy. So that's sort of quite an interesting possible way of thinking about it is that comedy and tragedy are the same, in that people don't learn from their mistakes. So I think what I would say on a series would be to say that that the not learning from the mistakes can lead to a story, like a big story cliffhanger at the end of your 6 episodes. And so that's that should be okay. Sorry, I've got a bit of a noise going on in the background.
That's okay.
Here, but yeah.
So yeah, I think I like this idea.
So
that
hang on a second.
The series is building to something.
Yeah.
I think is good.
Yeah. I just.
So you're just muting yourself for a while. So let me just take over. So the story arc thing is, I think, really. So my worry is that people are actually trying to write a box set. They're trying to write a 6-hour movie, and actually, we don't really want people writing a 6-hour movie. We want people writing entertaining little half hours that just go round and round and round. I think that's what people like about them, is the fact that it's the same every week, which feels creatively undemanding, but actually it's about as hard as it gets to find new ways of telling the same stories. And some sitcoms really are telling the same story every week. I mean, The Goldbergs is an example of it is pretty much the same thing every single week. But I think that's okay, because people like it, and I must have watched 60 or 70 episodes before I got fairly just like, oh, okay, I think I've seen enough of these. And then they tend to move things on, bring in new characters and all that kind of stuff. So I think I like Dave's idea, though, that the character is building to something. So if it's building up to, there's going to be a wedding, there's going to be a day of reckoning, there's going to be some kind of moment, which we may discover in episode 4 is not going to happen. But I think overall, what you want to do is to give your audience a sense of this character is trying to achieve goals. If they want to be the first person to do something, what's the first thing they have to do? Well, they're going to have to, in the first series, learn Russian. Because all of the textbooks and all of the thing about doing that thing means Russian. So their series aim is to do this one thing. And then their next aim is to do the other thing. And then the next aim is to... So I think that's okay to have that motif for the series. But I think people love the idea of storytelling and that the story is the star. But in sitcoms, the characters are the stars. The characters give the jokes. And the story is what you need for the characters to be funny. Whereas if you're interested primarily in the story, that's a movie, that's a novel, that's not a sitcom. And I think that's the great problem we're finding at the moment, is that people think they're writing sitcoms because they're half an hour long and they're funny, but they're not sitcoms. They're an installment of a very long movie or box set. Is that fair, Dave?
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, I missed the middle of that, but in case
very
James hasn't...
You missed Act 2, Dave. You missed Act 2.
I did, yeah. But just the ways around it, and again, these are things I've talked about a little before, but is particularly if you think about family sitcoms, a good way around developing a character arc, and you can do it, I think, is that a character can learn from their mistakes in the episode, but by the end of the episode they have stopped learning from those mistakes. And you see this a lot in Brooklyn Nine-Nine or Modern Family. The characters they go through whatever they go through. They a big thing happens in Modern Family. It's an emotional big thing. In Brooklyn Nine-Nine, it's probably a kind of quite a plot heavy thing, but there's often a kind of deep moral question kind of going on in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and people have to kind of compromise their views and change how they think about something sometimes. It can be quite serious in that, but by the end of the episode, in that last scene, they kind of everything's reset. Phil Dunphy learns in Modern Family that he can't be the dad that his dad was, and he kind of there's that black moment he has, and sort of 2/3 of the way through, and everything's fine after that. But then at the end, there's the little scene at the end. He's back to trying to be that person, and that's like real life, isn't it? We're all like that. We'll say, "I'm sorry. Look, I know I messed up there. I'm really sorry. I promise you, I'm never going to do that again. It'll never happen again." Cut to the next week, and we are making going through the same patterns with family and whatever. But I think you look at a show like Modern Family, and it does deal with the sort of very dull, banal kind of stories that we all have in our families. But I know, James, you're not a fan of the It's X's Birthday sitcom really plot. But by the time Modern Family has been through 12 seasons, you're starting to get that the person's birthday, the 50th birthday, is going to be a bit more of a kind of very different kind of episode to when they had the 40th birthday, and a story has happened in that time. So it is difficult, and people are asking for comedy drama and more of that. But you kind of have to try and keep within the confines of your character, learning just enough, I think.
Yeah, I think here's a new thought though. Wow, new thought. I think it's because, for whatever reason, maybe we're seeing them a lot more on TV, but also this is kind of the expectation is an awful lot of sitcoms. People are writing sitcoms, coming up with them, and it starts with a birthday. It starts with oh my goodness, I've just turned 50. How have I ended up like this? Right, I'm going to do big quest thing now. Or, I've just come back from work and my wife has left me and my house has burned down. Finally, I get to be a pirate, and I go off. But the thing is, if you start with that really big, inciting incident, it feels like, in a slightly Chekhov's gun kind of way, that it's going to have to resolve in a big resolution kind of incident too. So I think in a way, in The Office, you start and it's just another regular day in the office, isn't it? And it's just like, this is the world's worst boss who thinks he's the world's best boss. And the ennui of this is just another day in purgatory. And that's kind of, because I think in the first, I like a first episode that feels like it's walked in on something, which is why I always say, don't start your sitcom where it's the first day at work. It could be the second day if you really want to, but why is it the first day? Can't it be it's their first anniversary of being here at work? Well, I've been here a year now, and you would think by now I would know the following things, and I really don't. So I think it's because the way sitcoms are often conceived and started with a big inciting incident, that therefore they're leading towards a resolution of that. And historically, sitcoms, that just isn't the case. Cheers just started. It was in a bar. Friends starts in the cafe. It doesn't start in the church where Rachel was. She runs in a wedding dress. But it's also not the first thing that happens. And she's one of 6 characters. So this is kind of her story. But I think once I'm rambling now. Am I on to anything there, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that is, kind of, we're still kind of working out what the answer is, because it's like a relatively new way of looking things. I mean, I grew up with Porridge, that's set in prison, and prison is the perfect place where nothing's going to change. The same people, they're stuck there. They really are stuck there. But you can look at Only Fools and Horses becomes a comedy drama about 5 or 6 seasons in, because it's a very successful show, and it's impossible to keep it at that level. And it's probably, John Sullivan's covered every possible angle of the dodgy dealer, whatever. And, it starts to, you have to kind of flesh out those characters a bit. So Only Fools and Horses starts to become a kind of comedy drama from being straight out a comedy. And it's so good that you can barely see the join, really. But I think that's a kind of what people are expecting, what commissioners seem to be expecting is, like a kind of Only Fools and Horses kind of crammed into sort of 4 series, say, so that you've already got the cast of characters and dodgy dealing and nobody's learning anything from anything. But then, magically the whole sort of family thing comes out, the whole kind of brothers as father-son relationship is also becomes a kind of thing, so it is a kind of I think commissioners, they want their cake and to eat it, and and more, so I guess all we can do is just get those characters right, and really get those characters right, and really think about the relationships between the characters, and hope that somewhere in that you've either got something that feels like it could, last forever, or, feels like it could develop into something bigger. And, The Office is basically 7 hours of comedy and it's over. And that's not much more than 2 movies, really, is it? A little bit more, say three movies worth. It's not a huge amount, but it ends and it can't continue from, that Christmas special. Nothing can kind of, nothing.
Although, isn't there a movie?
I mean, obviously 10 years down the line when, Ricky Gervais needs to come up with a new idea or something or whatever. I don't know. But when something's been as huge a success as that, then you are given permission to come back 10 years later.
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
For us mortals whose shows merely sort of do quite well, you do a 3 or 4 season series or something, and that's your lot, really.
Yeah.
So, there's no coming back.
So, next question. Hopefully that was helpful. Our next question is from Andrew. And I think he's a fellow who I've seen do YouTube videos about walking, which are excellent. I really.
Oh yes, Andrew. Yes, I know.
But he asked me. He says he's about to go on a long journey on a drama comedy project. How was writing the Shakespeare and Hathaway episode you did differ from writing a normal sitcom script? I mean, because Shakespeare and Hathaway is a comedy murder mystery, and in actual fact, it's probably more like a sitcom than anything else. And I think murder mysteries generally are, in terms of, it's the same lead characters doing the same sort of thing every week, and it's just a bit of a rearrangement. So you want a bit of surprise and originality, but actually they're normally characters and relational. So the Sherlock Holmes series is perfectly fun, but the relationship is the most interesting. Elementary is really good. It's a character comedy. Elementary. The plotting is often ingenious, and sometimes it's a little bit like, okay, if you say so, because the characters are so good. So I would say lots of these murder mysteries are more sitcom than anything else. They're not trying to make you laugh in quite the same way, because they're withholding information from you and sort of confusing you. But overall, I found it very, very sitcom-like, and I was terrified that I wasn't really doing a very good job of the murder mystery, and was cramming in extra clues and details and all this kind of stuff. And they were just like, "Yeah, you don't need that. You don't need that. You're a sitcom guy. Just make it funny. It'll be fine." So, that's what we hired you for, the jokes. And actually, the central relationship between Shakespeare and Hathaway is really sweet. It's really fun and interesting. So in that situation, really, how does the plot serve to give them good conversations? Because also, I think in previous series, they've discovered that one would go one way and sort of solve this bit, and the other one would go the other way and solve this bit. And actually, they discovered, can we just keep them together in scenes doing detecting together, because they have different strengths and weaknesses. They see different things and they relate in different ways to each other and to the person they're interviewing or interrogating. So I think it is really sitcom, and I'd love to do more of it because I know how to do that. I'm not sort of trying to there's no really long running thing. And also at the end of the episode, like a proper sitcom, really, we kind of forget that someone's been murdered and that someone else is going to be murdered next week. Because if we didn't, then we would be seriously worried about the body count in and around Stratford-on-Avon. Just as, Oxford is an incredibly dangerous place to be, given Morse, Endeavour, and Lewis. And they're 2 hours long, and there's usually at least 2 murders in each one. So there's a kind of an artifice to it that I think we're fine with, which is why they're very sitcom-y. That's my answer, at least. Any comments on that, Dave? I know it's sort of...
Yeah.
Go on.
I've not written... I mean, I did try writing screenplays before, when I first sort of stopped doing stand-up and things, but my current experience, my most recent experience of writing a novel has been, I think, sounds a little bit similar, really, to you, in that where I have kind of worried a little bit much about I am not a novelist, and I've tried to be more of a novelist. And actually, some of the notes that I've got back from people is, the comedy, stick to the comedy, which is exactly what you're saying. And actually, that there are very strong sitcom elements, I find, to what I'm writing. And I think about, my hero really as a comedy writer was David Nobbs. Yeah. And David Nobbs just kind of glided effortlessly from novels. He turned his novels, Reggie Perrin novels, into sitcom. He wrote comedy dramas, and he wrote novels separately, and so he just, but everything that I ever read of David Nobbs, I read most of his novels and things, but everything I read or watched, had his voice, and that was the really sort of crucial thing about it. And I think that's whatever your comedy, whatever your voice is going to come through whatever the form is you're writing.
Yeah. Definitely. Just going back to the genre stuff, Adrian on Twitter asks, he's actually watching and has commented, but his question on Twitter was about Always Sunny in Philadelphia is very self-contained in almost every episode. Every now and again, something comes up again, but the characters never learn and start again every week, good or bad. I would just say good. That's a sitcom. And it's doing really well.
And I think in the same way that as you say, we don't sit and watch Midsummer Murders or Shakespeare and Hathaway and say, but that means that, and you occasionally read these things, Stratford has a higher murder rate than New York, or, all this sort of in this world. We kind of know. And in the same way in sitcom, we know that people aren't, that sitcom is not real life. It is an artifice, and you can reset people, and but it is close to life, I think, and that's okay.
Well, I think the thing that makes it close to life is the fact that people don't change, and they never learn. Even now we're ever more mindful of confirmation bias. And that in the public square, at least, the battle lines are drawn between, it's still leave and remain, and vaccines and masks, and no vaccines and no masks, and historically, Labour and Conservative, and there are just sort of these endless debates go on, and people tend not to change their minds. And if they do change their minds, they change them over an incredibly long period of time, to the point where you probably can't remember when you changed your mind on something. You look back at the 23-year-old you and just go, oh, I used to think X was the case, and I don't think that anymore. But there was no 1 week where you changed your mind. You just sort of realized that framework, that way of thinking didn't work for you, or didn't fit your experience, or didn't match reality, or simply wasn't true. and that you've sort of started to adopt another one. But people don't. I mean, I think people just think that people respond to facts, and they don't. The best example of this is when the guy who discovered the cure for stomach ulcers, he said it's a problem with the bacteria, and you need to drink a thing, and it will sort out the bacteria. And all of the medical experts said there's no bacteria in your stomach because it's completely acid. The bacteria couldn't survive. And he said, no, I think there is. And he eventually tested it on himself and then wrote papers and papers and proved that he was correct. And 10 years later, people still just said, no, that's not true. It's like, so people do not change their mind. They do not respond to evidence because their narrative, the story that they tell themselves, their own justification for everything, the thing that they're aiming for, that the big lie that they tell themselves, or the big truth that they tell themselves, is not going to be affected by the events of 1 week, even if they're escalated, sitcom-y, extreme. They'll just dust themselves off and go back to where they were before. So that would be my pro sitcom rant. On that, at least. Next question here is so Jake says about writing fan fiction can be a good exercise in finding your own voice. So yeah, if you want to kind of write a sitcom just to get it out of your system, I think that's fine, but I think you really do need to be more original in what you say. In what you're writing about. One more question says, some of the best comedy is relatable. How do you create relatable characters without making them cliches? Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, James. Yeah, well, I guess I'm glad you didn't use the L word there. The likable, relatable is great. I suppose the way to make a character not be a cliche is just you just have to put a little bit of work into them. You need to know what goals your characters have. What outward goal do they want, and what do they want from within themselves. I mean, they want. If a character wants respect or something, how does this show itself? And you just have to kind of keep kind of thinking of stuff and eliminating it. It's in the same way that the first joke you think of is rarely the best one. It's the same with characters, that the first trait you think of with the character is not necessarily the right one. And I mean, I often get sent if I get stuff from people saying, "Oh, this character is this, and this, and this," and they put sort of half a dozen words together, which are like, kind of could come from anywhere really, and you kind of have to, you have to sort of chip away and find something in your character that resonates, and maybe it's something that resonates with yourself, and this is something actually I've been writing a lot about recently, is about being honest. Be honest with yourself. Be self-aware. What is it about you?
Back to the Greeks, they know thyself. Is that Socrates? Or was that Aristotle?
I think that might have been Socrates. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But
I always say that is the best, most wisest advice that is not in the Bible. Those are the only two words that aren't in the Bible that I would like to be in the Bible, but aren't. Anyway, that's a side issue.
Know thyself, and that's not just and even people who think they know they know themselves, that actually they don't necessarily know. They're trying too hard to know themselves, and going back to what you were just saying, James, about the sort of confirmation bias thing. What is it about me that makes me feel this certain way? And it's about, well, actually, there is still inside me, there is this sort of injured child who is kind of trying to get the last word in the argument. And another thing, and that's something that I recognize in myself a lot, and I try and I see it in other people, and I try and bring that into to characters and things where I'm writing, because that's just something that I know really, really well. And I will, if I'm developing a character, I can see how that's a thing that I know so much about. And it's not a particularly likable trait, or it's not likable at all. It's very annoying. But the more I examine it, the more I can see, well, it's funny, but it's relatable, because I know other people feel that way as well, but we just rarely admit these things to ourselves. So be honest.
Yeah, but I think brevity is really important, because it feels like sometimes you can tell that someone's backing away from making a character kind of too sitcom-y, in inverted commas, and so they then sort of moderate and nuance the character. And if you I've read show bibles for this show or that show, where someone has kind of said, these are the characters. So this character loves this. She really loves trees. She loves everything about them. She's not a tree hugger, but she's the kind of person that wants to make, that likes to stand under the tree as the leaves are falling. But also, she's not afraid to run through a field and to place her hand over the wheat. She's really kind to her mother. Her dad really winds her up, and she's got this long running feud with her brother, because she's got a fierce sense of justice to her. It's just like, I don't know who that character is. The more you talk, the less I know who this person is. It was just like, she loves trees because she thinks they're magic, because she's a dreamer.
Okay, great. Well, I would stop there and explore each of those. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I love trees. How much do you love trees? Well, in fact, I remember a very weird book from my teenage years by John Wells, who used to do the characters with Rory Bremner and John Wells and John Bird. Actually, no, he used to work with John Bird, but he wrote a book about a man who loved trees so much, he actually loved them in the physical sense. So that was a really weird book.
Okay.
And so, but I mean, people love trees, and what does that mean? What is our relationship with trees? And can you become a real can you bore for England about trees?
In which case, some people, so your character may love trees because they've memorized 900 different leaves and can just tell you what any tree is. That's a person who loves knowledge more than trees. That's a different character. But this character thinks trees are magic. So it's like, so go on, Dave. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, that's fine. And I think so. You go as far as you can with that. See where it takes you. And now you've already taken it down a promising route there, James. I think so. And all the stuff you were saying about running through the wheat fields and with the brother and stuff. We're kind of. That's by the way now, because here's an insight, here's an interesting comedy insight, here's a character who loves trees. That's all that and this loving trees thing is going to get them in. They're going to do things. They're going to chain themselves to trees for unnecessary protests. They're going to grow trees in places where trees can't be grown. They're just going to. They are in the way in the same way you say confusion is the enemy of sitcom, and I always say a character is the architect of their own demise. This character loves trees so much it's going to get them into scrapes, get them into trouble. So that's kind of how you take a thing, whatever that thing is, and it's a thing that that you can relate to, and then just take it to its comic extreme.
Yeah. Anton on the chat says, I will never look at a tree in the same way again now, Dave.
I'm sorry. I think it's called...
Yeah.
I think it's called A Melon for Ecstasy, I think is the title of the book. It's a very, very weird book.
Let's not get into sap. But just to circle back to the word relatable, I think the thing that I'm always keen for people to do is I don't need to personally relate to the character, but I need to relate to what they want in the sense of I can understand it. So if a character fundamentally wants respect, I can understand that. If they fundamentally want to be loved, or if they fundamentally want to be accepted, if they fundamentally want someone to follow, they're looking for a goal. They don't have a purpose, and they're looking for purpose. Not a great sitcom character, but actually what they're looking for is a place of safety and a mission where all the other, because they don't, so we sort of know people like that, and we can relate, so we can understand that. But I think it's the situation and their character as well as their goal that gives you the specificity, so that I think the worry there is that there's an element of, it feels like these are going to be stock characters and they're going to be cliches. But actually, the moment you've got the variation of kind of personal preferences, overall life goal, and situation, you're really not going to be overlapping with anything else particularly. And if you end up with a character who is a bit of a type, so Captain Nick Medhurst in Bluestone 4-2 was a bit of a Sam Malone from Cheers. But this is the bomb disposal Afghan British ex-public school version, who thinks, who loves being a bomb disposal guy because he basically gets to sleep with anyone that he wants because he's so flipping brave. Except he now can't sleep with this woman that he wants because she's got principles and religion and Jesus. So she's not having it. And it's also not appropriate to do that on a forward operating base in Afghanistan. So you can have the same sort of character, but everything about them is so different that you really don't need to worry about that. So that in a way can reassure you that you're probably not lapsing in to cliche on that. We should probably keep going. There's a couple more questions left.
Yeah. Okay.
On the chat. Adrian says, I love the idea of sitcoms being a second act, but does that make it harder for world building? Just get on board straight away. Lots of sitcoms now seem to want the world building aspect. Who wants that? I think it's mainly only writers that want that. Because look, even Stranger Things, within the first 2 minutes, you go, oh, it's the 80s. Oh, it's sort of a Spielberg, John Hughes film, and there's weird stuff going on. Okay. There's very little that you need to sort of, I know it's not a sitcom, but again, the Goldbergs, it's the 80s, and she's a really, really Jewish mother, as it were. She's a smother. And he's got a video camera. Your eye and brain just process this immediately. And you really don't need to, your opening title sequence, your first scene, you're up and running. So I think really people kind of want to build worlds more than they need to. I think you may need to know the answer to lots of these questions, but then you can basically forget about them, write them down, put them in the show Bible, and then write the script. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say, I do think world building is important because I think it gives us a sense of place very quickly, and it also can give us a sense of character. And show often referred to, of course, is Frasier, and Frasier's flat
58 minutes.
Frasier's character. So Frasier's flat is Frasier's character, but the chair that arrives 5 minutes into episode 1 and stays for the end of the 200 odd episodes is Dad. And so you have a world there, and that is there all the time. You've got Frasier, urbane, sophisticated, beautiful flat. It's eclectic, wonderful. This is the character. This is who I am world. And then Frasier's dad, beer in hand, horrible chair, aesthetically unpleasing, which is the worst crime in Frasier's world, and in slap in the middle of his life. And I feel that's a kind of that for me is a really good example of how you kind of you build a world. You should, what our eyes can see, as you say, is the whole time that's what you see.
Yeah, and I think if you want to build extremely complicated worlds, then I think you probably, I don't think it's a sitcom if you're not careful. You know, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, it's a police precinct. And basically Jack Peralta wishes he was in Die Hard, you know, and he can't believe he gets to be a cop. And he clearly has father issues that come through that he kind of tries to resolve with Captain Holt. But overall, it's police precinct. So, yeah, I don't know. I think you need to do the work on the world building. And then, unlike a maths exam, do not show you're working. This is sitcom, not maths, or math, as our American friends call it. Tom's question, and we should probably wrap this up. I think get one more question.
Just a very quick.
Go on.
Okay.
Did you have one more comment on that?
I was just going to say with Brooklyn Nine-Nine, though, where I would just a sort of slight disagreement. I would say that the world, we can see that world. You know, it is a family. It's a family sitcom. If you think that, you know, the dad, who's Holt, who is a little bit distant, he's got his own office, and Jeffords is mum, and mum is with the kids. You know, so there is that kind of, again, it's just kind of very clear. You know, this mum's with the kids, and dad is sort of one step removed in his office, and you know, mum has to do all the kind of work on the ground, and dad is a sort of slightly aloof figure. So again, I think there is a little bit of actual physical world building happening there.
Yeah. So, but again, you've done the thing. You've got those key relationships, but these come out through character, don't they? They come out through the plot. They come out through the uniforms. You know, we can see that. You know, we can see who's in charge through body language, but also through Captain Holt. Okay, so he's in charge then. You know, you really can get it. And also, the beauty of police stuff in particular is that their job is really easy to understand. You know, catch bad guys. That's kind of it. And it's the kind of bad guys you get in New York. Well, that kind of could be anyone really, but yeah, we should wrap up. Final question. Yeah. Tom says, James and Dave, question is why most British networks insist on sitcom episodes being only 6 per series. In my opinion, 10 to 15 would be perfect. Well, as a sitcom writer, that would be my preference too. I think, well, having said that, I mean, lots of them are 6, but actually they're quite often 8 now. I think the first series of Bluestone was 8. And you know, historically they've been 6 because they've normally been written by 1 or 2 people. You know, budgets get overcommitted. People don't want to overcommit to budget, so making 12, that's suddenly a £3 million cost rather than £1.5 million cost, or wherever it is it costs. So I think there's something in 6 which feels satisfying, but I suspect it's just an anomaly from the past, and that's kind of the way it's worked out. But I don't have any great insights on that, Dave. Have you?
Yeah.
No.
I think it's just if you look at Britain versus America, Britain is a cottage industry. It's very, very small. Everybody knows everybody, and you know, one person writes 6 episodes. In America, it's an industry. You know, it's got a timetable. It's got the pilot season, and then they cull the pilots and they make the series, and they run the series from whenever it's September through till May, and that's and there are 22 episodes or whatever. That's changed a bit because they've borrowed the English model from people like HBO and Netflix, whatever. But it is mainly a financial thing, I would say. But actually, if you look at kids TV is a little bit more like the American model. They tend to go for 13 episodes in the first series, and again, it is still financial because it's their. They pay a lot less for kids TV than they do for grown-ups TV. Which, going back to what I said right at the start, okay, you don't earn as much writing for kids TV, but you should definitely think about it, and you can come up with your 13 parts series 1 to your heart's content for children's. And
for that, you need a script. And Dave, just let's round off. Tell us about writing a script in 8 weeks. I'm putting a thing in the comments. davecohen.org, your latest blog on but just give us the 30-second pitch.
Yeah, it's go to davecohen.org.uk and find out about Build a Sitcom. We work together, and over 8 weeks, I work with you individually and build your idea into a first draft of a script.
Excellent. So that's kind of a personal tailored service. My much less personal one is called Write a Sitcom in a Day. And so it's just a question of just taking the day off and just really just trying to work out what do I need to do to write this script. And so I'll tell you as much as I can in the course of a day, but then I will be just answering lots of questions as well. You can just ask me questions as we go, and there's breaks and we'll do questions, but it's a really full-on day. And the idea is to come away with a real strong sense of what you need to do to get that script written, finished, polished, and sent out, rather than just kind of running aground. Because normally people start writing the script before it's ready, and people don't probably spend enough and people halfway through the script realize that they've made a problem, that there are problems, and it's kind of too late to fix them, and they've now run out of time because they didn't know how long it was going to take to get to this thing. So it's all about planning, really. So that would be my pitch. There's a link to that in the comments as well if you want to join me for that. Cool. Okay, well, I think we've got away with this went all right, didn't it?
Yeah.
Great. And we've got a podcast, Sitcom Geeks. Google that, go to the British Comedy Guide, and you will find our podcast there. Google it, look it up on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get Spotify, and there are over 170 episodes of me and Dave talking about sitcom, and we don't even repeat ourselves that often. It feels like we do, but actually we talk about an awful lot, don't we, Dave?
We do. I'm surprised actually how little we do repeat. Except although I will always mention Frasier. I think.
Right.
Somehow,
somewhere along the way. It always gets in.